Hi, gorgeous, and welcome to the Confident, Energized, and Sexy Mama Show. I am Dorit Palvanov, your host, feminine energy expert, health coach for women, registered holistic nutritionist, and the creator of the groundbreaking health and mindset program for moms, Energized, designed for perimenopausal women who are done having kids and are ready to get their confidence, energy, and sexy back. Ladies, think about it. What would the world look like if, as women, we stopped being so harsh on ourselves and instead felt more energized, powerful, confident, and more connected to our bodies? What if, as women, we honored the fact that we are built and wired differently than men, and being different does not mean being inferior? That the go, go, go mentality, alongside doing more to have more without ever pausing and resting, only leads to chronic stress, anxiety, burnout, overwhelm, lack of joy, and corrodes our health, relationships, and vitality. What if, as women, wives, and mothers, we had the courage and confidence to desire more? More freedom, power, energy, joy, abundance, pleasure, fun, play, and sex, all on our own terms. Mama, you deserve to feel good. You deserve to form healthy relationships, and your body needs, craves, and deserves pleasure. This is your birthright. You're here because you believe in your feminine energy. You're here because you care about health and the environment, and you're not afraid to take action and change. You're here because you don't want to pass on a pattern of self destruction, hiding, and not speaking your truth to your daughters. You're here because you're done feeling stuck, living a mediocre life as a half woman. You're here because you are done struggling and, frankly, can no longer afford to feel like crap. Each week, I will be here for you, dropping a healthy dose of inspiration and motivation, as well as introducing you to my brilliant guests, where we will dive deep into all things womanhood, feminine power, energy, psychology, holistic and alternative health, food, nutrition, hormones, fitness, mindset, motherhood, relationships, sex, business, and much more. So, Mama, are you ready to take back control of your health? Let's do this. Hey, gorgeous. Welcome to the Confident, Energized, and Sexy Mama podcast. This is Dorit Palvanov, your host. I think it's time to talk about burnout. And the thing that I am picking up from the women I work with, my clients, and the women in my community, and women who connect with me through discovery calls and all of that, I am seeing two kinds of burnout. Two kinds of burnout that are inflicting women. The first type is work or career related burnout. So, whether it is women who are really, really tired from working nonstop and doing and achieving, and so many of the women that I connect with are very often, they find themselves in a men dominated work environment. And I see this influx of women leaving corporate and leaving the quote unquote masculine structures of work because it just doesn't work for them. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more today. And then the other type of burnout that I'm seeing is home life related burnout. That's interesting because you would think if you're home, why would you get burnt out? Right? However, I'm seeing more and more women who are feeling like they've been burnt out from being at home, staying at home, giving their life and soul to the household, to the husband, to the kids. So many of these women would use language as, I feel domesticated. And so What I wanted to share today is a little excerpt from my very recent brand new audio training, which is called Get to Know Yourself. And you can find it by heading over to www.doritpalvanov.com/get to know yourself. In this training, you will learn 3 steps to understanding your female body, your female psyche, and the feminine energy system so that you can live your life with confidence, energy, and passion. So, no more burnout. We're done. All right? No more burnout. It's time you and I sit one on one and crack the code for why you feel so burnt out, whether you are someone who is a career woman and having a work-related burnout, or someone who is having a home life type of burnout. Okay, and so let's head on over to today's little excerpt, and at the end I'm going to share a beautiful interview I have done with Dr. Valerie Rein, who is actually the author of a book that is in so much alignment with today's topic. And it's called Patriarchy Stress Disorder. And we are going together with Dr. Valerie to dive much deeper into the question of what's wrong with me and why do so many women tend to burn out. So stay tuned. This is going to be a beautiful conversation, and I'm going to share a little bit more about Dr. Valerie after I'm done sharing the little excerpt. And so without further ado, let's do this. Get to know yourself as a woman. You know that the experience of a woman is different from a man's, and you already know this. Difference doesn't mean inferiority. But the fact that women are expected to operate in life and business as a man is absurd. Men and women have been created differently for a reason, and I want you to live your life embracing this truth and accepting it. We're going to begin by introducing you to 2 types of women I work with. And by the end of it, you'll self-identify which woman you resonate with the most. Why does this matter? Simplicity. Isn't that what we all crave? I've been in this industry long enough to see how confusing health can be, especially for women. Your conditions are merely symptoms of a deeper rooted issue. Many of the answers to the questions you have lay in the framework I'm going to teach you today. So if you have conditions like hormonal imbalances, heavy, painful, irregular periods, or emotional and mental instabilities, brain fog, moodiness, overwhelm, snappy behavior, or if you have autoimmune conditions, the questions, and we all have those questions. Why do I tend to burn out? Why do I feel sucked dry of energy? Why doesn't life feel fun anymore? Why do I feel frustrated and uninspired? The answers to these questions lay in the differences between the 2 types of women I've observed in my practice. Actually, not so much the type as much as how these women operate in the world, how they use their body's energy to live her life. So let's talk about the first one. And I'm going to, for the sake of simplicity, I've given them names. So the first one, her name is Kimberly. So meet Kimberly. She is an ambitious go-getter. She's confident and experienced in the marketplace, and she knows how and where to push to see results in her job and business. She's a kick-ass businesswoman. She's busy and has a demanding job. She's the breadwinner in her household, often the only woman in a male-dominant workplace, striving, competing to be seen and heard against all odds. She's determined, hardworking, relentlessly paving her way to the top. She's professional, educated, often has multiple degrees under her belt, maybe even a PhD. She's incredibly smart, talented, skilled, and tired. Actually, she's exhausted. She secretly wonders, what's the point of it all? Kimberly feels good at work but unsuccessful at home. She misses the kids. She craves to spend more time with them, dreams of vacations and time off just to catch up with them. She has a nanny and a housekeeper, but she misses home. She wishes to have more time. When she leaves the house, she exits her body. She isn't satisfied with her marriage. Her sex life is so so. It's good, but it's not great. Her husband isn't the man she hoped he would be. She often considers separation but knows this will shatter the kids. Her man isn't a great husband but is a great dad. Women like Kimberly tend to come into my practice feeling guilty because seemingly they have everything: the career, a family, the house, cars, vacations, a convenient lifestyle, but still something isn't enough. Women like Kimberly often use birth control pills for most of their lives, and when they get off of it, experience their emotions for the first time and don't know what to do with them. Kimberly often wonders why her body is so messy. She wants to get her periods under control. She feels afraid, disgusted, and even mad at femininity. She questions herself and often grumpy. She has vicious dreams and spirals down on an emotional roller coaster. Food gives her a wicked hangover. She feels unstable, unbalanced, wobbly, and she wonders, what is wrong with me? All right, so that's first one. That's the first kind of woman that I see in my practice. The second woman, her name is Melissa. So meet Melissa. Melissa is a stay-at-home mom, or she works, but not her life's work. She has dedicated her life to her family. She spends loads of energy trying to please everybody and rarely takes time for herself. She depends on her husband financially and dreams of financial independence. Melissa has a vision of starting a blog or a business that she can run from home, working part-time hours in between her household responsibilities. She knows it's possible. She had seen other women doing it, and she knows that she can do it too. But for some reason, she never gets to it. She promised herself to get up early in the morning, but never does. She knows she needs to be consistent, but never has the energy to stick with it. Her days are hectic with her waking up with the kids and feeling moody. Sometimes she gets stubborn and doesn't want to be around anyone, husband and kids included. She just wants time for herself, alone. Every now and then she has breakdowns and lashes out. Mental and emotional breakdowns cause her trouble in her marriage and with the kids too. She's infested with fear, confusion, and regret. She's stressed about money all the time. She often wonders when will she be making her own money. She wants her husband to be proud of her, but instead he judges her and can't understand why she's not coping. When he gets upset, she gets upset and tends to lose focus as well. He spends hours upon hours trying to fix and analyze her by acting like her therapist. She feels trapped and domesticated. She feels like she's lost herself in the life of motherhood and being a wife. She doesn't believe she has the power to break the generational pattern she has been born into. She feels alone and craves community. Melissa wants so desperately to belong to something bigger than herself and her family. In terms of health conditions, women like Melissa complain about things like irregular and heavy periods, thyroid and adrenal issues, adult acne, weight gain, bulky arms and back, brain fog, cognitive and mental issues, short-term memory loss, and emotional eating. She too wonders, what is wrong with me? So, there you have it. This has been the little excerpt from my brand new audio training called Get to Know Yourself. And so learning to identify yourself, whether you are Kimberly or Melissa, is step number one in the process of getting to know yourself. And the other two steps, I'm going to leave it as a surprise. For those of you who are interested, head on over to www.doritpalmanov.com/get to know yourself. Grab that audio training and start listening and learn how to finally get to know yourself. And to expand on the question of what is wrong with me, and today's topic is nothing is wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. I am so thrilled to introduce you to Dr. Valerie Rein, who is going to be my guest for today's show. Dr. Valerie Rein has discovered patriarchy stress disorder, PSD, and created the only science-backed system for helping women achieve their ultimate success, happiness, and fulfillment by healing the generational trauma of oppression. She holds an educational master's in psychological counseling from Columbia University and a PhD in psychology from the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology. Her best-selling book, Patriarchy Stress Disorder, The Invisible Inner Barrier to Women's Happiness and Fulfillment, and her cutting-edge programs have helped thousands of women shift from survival to thriving and master the game of how good can it get in their work and personal lives. Dr. Valerie is a sought-after speaker and trainer at conferences and companies committed to setting new standards of excellence in their industry in diversity, equity and inclusion, employee satisfaction, their physical and mental health, and creativity and innovation. This woman, you guys, is incredible. I'm so blessed to that our paths crossed, because I've learned so much from her. And also in my own evolution, I just felt like there is just something that I just don't know. And if you've been listening to my show long enough, you know that I am more of a feeling person. I have a very strong intuition, and I just feel things for the majority of the time. And that's how I make my decisions in life, based on if it feels good in my body. And so I just felt like I have to look closer at this whole conversation around generational patterns and generational trauma. And I'm not quite yet ready to talk about this, because it means, first of all, I need to sit with my own trauma and with my own generational crap. And then also, exposing my mom's trauma and my grandmother's trauma and my great-grandmother's and so on and so forth. And so, yeah, it's an interesting conversation. It's an important conversation, because this is like our blind spot. And very often, if you don't see the car in your blind spot, you can get into a serious car accident. And so from my perspective, these blind spots, when we don't see them and we don't have an awareness about them, it can have really serious consequences, whether it is in our businesses or in our personal lives. And so today's conversation is super, super important. So some of the highlights for today's show, first of all, Dr. Valerie shares her story of burnout and healing from it. And then you'll hear Valerie's definition and examples of patriarchy. We talk about, is it man-hating? And she also gets into the definition of trauma. So that was a super treat for me personally. If you're into psychology, I think you'll enjoy this too. And then the meat and potatoes of this episode was all about the 5 steps to healing patriarchy stress disorder. And what we've done, we've used my burnout story as the case study. So definitely make sure to stick around for that. And the last thing was Dr. Valerie answers my rapid fire questions. And so you'll hear her definition of feminine power, what makes her feel confident, energized, and sexy, and all of this goodness. After today's interview, hopefully you will understand that nothing stands in your way other than yourself and the trauma and oppression you've been carrying since you were born a female. One more thing I want to make sure to include is Dr. Valerie has an incredible weekend almost like a virtual retreat, and it's called the Thriving Experience. I joined it. I cannot wait to participate in that. And so I highly, highly encourage all of you listening to head on over to www.thethrivingexperience.com and sign up. It's completely free. It's a whole weekend where you are getting to do this kind of work along with thousands of women all over the world. And I think this is something that will blow your mind. So without further ado, here is my conversation, very raw and candid conversation with Dr. Valerie. Please enjoy it. I highly encourage you to go back to the show and re-listen, because there are some truths that she dropped here that I think needs some time to, for you to process. Another thing is that Dr. Valerie dropped the F word in this episode. And so I want to make sure that I let you know about this. This is explicit. I mean, everything else, I think it only happened once, but I don't like editing the show. I love keeping it real and raw. And so just know that if you have little ones around, put your headphones in and enjoy it. So without further ado, here is my interview with the amazing Dr. Valerie Rein. Enjoy. Hi, Valerie. Welcome.
Hi, Dorit. Thank you so much for having me.
I am so excited for this conversation. Like I said before we started recording, hopefully it's going to be kind of like a fusion between, my own personal story and then, your work. And hopefully this will serve everybody who is listening. So
That's
before
the
we
best.
begin,
Mm-hmm.
I always love to start with your story. So the women who are listening to the show are healing from burnout. It can be
Mm-hmm.
mental, emotional, physical, even spiritual. So burnout has a lot of, it has many different branches. And what I'm noticing from women, I work with, and also from the guests that I'm interviewing, is that we teach what we need to learn the most. So I
Yes.
assume that you have a healing from burnout story. So I want to hear that, as well as the why behind the work that you currently do with women in the world.
Hmm. Well, you assume correctly, Dorit. It's absolutely true. We teach what we most need to learn, and that's what makes us great teachers, right? I I see myself as my own toughest case. There
Yeah.
is so much work that happens in the lab every day on uncovering and healing layers and layers of patriarchy, stress disorder, which of course I turn around and share. And where it began for me, it began in childhood. It began with asking the question, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? Getting messages, don't be so smart. People don't like it. No one would want to marry you. Oh, don't wear this. You look like a slut. Don't wear that. You look like a nun. Oh, you look great, meaning you lost weight. Oh, you look so skinny. You look like a teenager. When will you look like a woman? Right? Like all these messages spelling out something is wrong. Something is wrong with me. And I discovered early on that academics was a pretty safe place for me. It came easy. And so I dove in, and people pretty much for the most part let me be. So it became my drug of choice. So I did great in school. I went on to study, wait for it, psychology. What else? What else would I study to figure out what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
And all those years later, I had 2 graduate degrees in psychology. I had a thriving private practice in New York, a family, beautiful home in the suburbs. I was living the life of my dreams, loving the work I did. Until one day, I was on the phone with a client when I noticed I was smiling only with the right side of my face, while the left side of my face just hung in there. And so did my left arm. I finished the call, got out, got in the car, and drove myself using my right arm, drove myself to the hospital. And there in the ER, they scanned me up and down the whole day. And then at the end, the verdict was just stressed,
Hmm.
which both relieved me and puzzled me to no end because I actually didn't feel stressed. I love my life. I love my work. And if you had asked me, are you happy? How are you doing? I would have said, absolutely. I'm absolutely happy. Everything is fine. So when I got the verdict, I looked at the clock and I realized that I could still make my evening client appointments. So I quickly changed out of the hospital gown into my civilian clothes and drove to the office and saw my clients as if nothing had ever happened. But the undeniable reality of ending up in the ER with symptoms of a stroke, even though it was just stress, stayed with me. And it pulled back the security blanket of workaholism
Hmm.
and this constant stress. And underneath it, the question of what's wrong with me was still there. And even though my life looked perfect on paper, underneath it, I did not feel as happy and fulfilled as I looked. And that was a deeply, deeply shattering realization because I had done it all. I had done it all I knew how to do: achievement, getting married, having a beautiful daughter, doing the work I loved, getting my education, etc. And also having been in therapy for years, having read heaps of self-help books, done workshops and programs, and still to not feel happy and fulfilled. Of course, the conclusion was something is so wrong with me. I am so broken beyond repair because nothing has worked. And it was a very dark and despairing moment. And thankfully thankfully I was curious. I was still asking questions, and one of the questions was, well, how come my clients are doing better? How come my clients are healing from this disconnection and numbness and reclaiming the fullness of their lives? How come they are stepping into their authentic living and feeling happy and fulfilled? What am I doing for them that I'm not doing for myself? And the answer was, with all of my clients, I was using mind body energy trauma healing tools. Even though predominantly they actually did not have any big traumatic experiences, they didn't have life threatening experiences, they had normal childhoods, normal lives, and yet all of them, without exception, were showing this telltale symptom of trauma, which is disconnection from parts of ourselves, from parts of our authentic being, from parts of our body, from parts of our self-expression, from our authentic dreams and desires, and of course, the ability to create the life designed by our desires in reality. And that brought me to my next question. Could there be a kind of trauma that we all have and don't even know it? And that's when the light bulb went off, because the research was coming out showing that trauma is genetically transmitted. Traumatic experiences are genetically transmitted. And recognizing that women have been oppressed for thousands of years and that oppression is traumatic, that connected the dots for me. And that's how the download of patriarchy stress disorder came in, as the invisible trauma, the invisible in the prison that holds us back from having a fulfilled life and drives us so hard, drives us into burnout oftentimes, because we are trying so hard to do what we are told to do to feel happy and fulfilled. But the reason it's not happening is because, not because we are not working hard enough, we're not trying hard enough, or we're failing. There are deeper reasons, and they have to do with this collective inherited trauma of oppression that needs to be recognized and healed.
Oh my gosh. This is so, I have chills all over my body because it's
Mm,
so similar to how I experienced it to be. And it's so interesting that both you and I are, um, we're both from the Soviet Union. What I'm picking
mhm,
up on is that it sounds like when you were younger, um, this realization or that perception that there is something wrong with you, it was kind of put aside during,
mhm.
your maturation time. And then, but she was still, that wasn't resolved within you, and so it was kind of like reawakened um, inside of you, and so it
Yeah.
was time to look at this little girl. um, and the other thing I wanted to ask you is, so the first time for me I came across generational patterning, and I've been working with coaches for years and years, and I was kind of, it's a very, there is a it's tough for me as a woman, and I know it's true for a lot of women, to really sit with the truth of that, because it, on the one
Mm,
hand it's really empowering, but on the other hand it's almost like, yeah, but like, if it's something that happened, with my mom and my grandmother, and and
yeah.
so on and so forth, like, what then I can do, right?
Right.
So it's empowering, it's both empowering and disempowering at the same time. So why don't we begin or continue with defining the word patriarchy and what it means,
Mm,
because I know, I mean, we hear this word all around, and
yeah.
both you and I, we work with women, and we hear, we are feminists. I call myself feminine feminist because I don't
Mm,
necessarily resonate with, liberal feminism. But um, patriarchy, we have a special connection with this word or what we
mhm.
think it means. So why don't we start with your definition of patriarchy? Um, is it man hating? Let's explore that a little bit.
Mhm. Yeah, words, right? We can use the same word and mean entirely different things. So thank you so much for asking. What I mean by patriarchy, I want to clarify first what I don't mean by patriarchy. When I say patriarchy, I do not mean men,
Mm,
actually, at all.
mm,
It's very important.
mhm,
And when I say men, I don't mean patriarchy. What I mean by patriarchy is this system of inequality and oppression that has been in existence for thousands of years.
mm,
And the system traumatized women deeply. The system traumatized men deeply and people across the gender spectrum. And our traumas differ and our healing differs. But it's the system itself that is traumatic. And we need to heal. It takes everyone to heal this collective wound. And yeah,
Can
everyone
you
can
give us some
benefit from this
examples?
healing.
Can you give us some examples of these oppressions? How are they manifested in society?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, I can talk about oppressions, and I also want to clarify what I mean by trauma,
Mhm,
because that is also a word that can mean very different things for different people.
mhm,
And even though with my 2 graduate degrees in psychology, I didn't see trauma in myself because the definition I was taught, the conventional patriarchal definition, involves a life-threatening event.
yeah.
And I figured if I didn't have life-threatening events, I didn't have trauma. But how come I had symptoms of trauma? And then every woman, and frankly, every human I got to work with had those as well in different degrees. So I've come to define trauma, and now the field is kind of beginning to catch up. It's still not convention, but there are a lot of voices in the field of psychology that are pointing out that there is a huge array of traumas. And now they distinguish between the capital T trauma, which involves life threatening events, and lowercase t traumas that involve um, everyday experiences that is still traumatic. And the way I define trauma is any experience that made you feel unsafe,
Mhm.
physically or emotionally, and led to creating trauma adaptations. And if we scan our experiences for those, we'll find a lot that's coming up on the radar. And so going back to the question of oppressions, there are just so many. And once we begin to see them, we cannot unsee them. And that rabbit hole runs deep. To give a few very blatant examples, women throughout patriarchy did not have ownership of our own bodies. We were property. Women were property of men. Children were property of men. And so when now we a lot of women struggle with loving our bodies, or being in our bodies, experiencing pleasure in our bodies, experiencing arousal, experiencing orgasms and pleasure both in the sexual realm and in everyday life, just the pleasure of being alive in our own skin, that has deep roots in that trauma of never even, the body was not ours. And what the body birthed, the children were not ours. Our brilliance, nobody cared about what we thought, right? So if we don't own our brilliance, or not confident enough, that's again, that doesn't have anything to do actually with what we think. We may think all the right things, but in our bodies, we carry the trauma of, first of all, it not being allowed, and second of all, it not being safe. Right? Women's bodies have been vilified forever as the source of sin, the source of, right? It's the downfall of mankind was through a woman, apparently. So women were to blame for everything. And so little wonder that now we have this vicious inner critic that is so quick to take blame for everything. Something happens, oh, what's wrong with me, right? What have I done wrong? That's the first place to look. That's rooted in trauma. Money is a huge thing. Women, we could never have our own money. Not allowed, not possible. It wasn't until 1960s that in the US, a woman could open her own bank account in her own name. It wasn't until 1988 that a woman could take out the a business loan without a male relative cosigner.
Oh.
1988, the government said, well, okay, all right, maybe we will give permission to a woman to have a business. 1988. And now we have all this conversation about, oh yeah, like women, we have this messed up relationship with money. Are you kidding me? We have profound trauma in this area. We were never allowed to have money. So now, of course, we have all this opportunity. We can ask for a raise, we can start a business. The sky is the limit. However, the essence of trauma is a time machine. And
Mm.
our trauma reality has not caught up with the actual reality of having opportunity. And every time it gets triggered, it's a time machine. It goes to the place of it's not safe, it's not possible. And even if we don't think that way, our nervous system signals unsafe, unsafe, unsafe. And then the nervous system goes three possible ways. Well, actually more, but the three more common ways are fight, flight, freeze reactions.
Mm.
There's also a mild appease reaction. That's where women tend to go first. Let's, people pleasing. Let's make peace. Let's not make waves, right? That's a stress reaction. That's something that women get kind of called out on
Yeah,
by
my
personal
clients say
development.
they group it under the word domesticated.
Domestic, I love that word. That's, yeah, domesticated by patriarchy.
Yeah.
So, lots and lots of aspects of traumatic experiences in relationships as well. We were never, it was never an option for us to love who we love. Women married for survival.
Mhm.
And again, being property, we were just like married off. And sometimes our family had to pay a dowry, right?
Yeah,
Because who wants who wants a woman for free? She's so
yeah,
worthless. We need to pay to like get her off our bill and onto the other families. It's so painful. It is
right.
so deeply disturbing. So now, of course, we get to love who we love, but that conditioning
It's
is
still there.
deep seated. Yeah. And when we have problems in our relationships, it's important to recognize most of them are not due to our character flaws and shortcomings. They're due to trauma patterns playing out in both partners.
Oh my gosh. Um, I loved I loved when you said trauma is a time machine because it's so true. When you talked about money, the relationship we have with money, I'm going to ask you about this a little bit later as I share my story. But you know, what I'm seeing is not only women are struggling with trauma
Yes, of
of
course.
patriarchy oppression. I see it also in men. Like, for example,
Yes.
my husband, my dad, my father-in-law, that are you familiar with the book Untamed
Yes.
by Glennon?
Hmm.
So she writes there that it's very efficient, and I love how she says that it's very efficient to have women oppressed in society, but it doesn't provide happiness for people who are involved in
Yeah.
society. And that's true for men and women, because what this
Yes.
does to men, it puts this responsibility on their shoulders, responsibility that they're not always ready to accept. Like, for example, I see now that not all men are wired for providing, whether it's financial. They might
Hmm.
be wired for providing, emotionally, or in terms of like safety, but not always financially. um,
Right.
and so it's interesting to see how patriarchy, it's not only like a woman's domain, it
Yes.
also touches men. By the way, do you know the
Absolutely.
meaning of the word hysteria in Latin?
Hmm. Yeah.
Suffering in the womb. And so that's another thing that is being, and especially from my line of work, I work with women who come to me specifically for physical symptoms of burnout.
Hmm.
And so, and a lot of times they're manifested through moodiness, or just feeling hectic, out of control, having their hormonal system being out of
Yeah.
whack. So my next question would be, Dr. Valerie, what is wrong with women?
Hmm.
Why are we so hysterical?
Yeah, and the short answer is nothing. There's
Yeah.
absolutely nothing wrong with women, and labels such as hysterical. It's such a great example of patriarchal pathologizing of women. That something is wrong with us, and by the way, let's name this condition by uh, one of our key w- organs, which is of course
Ovaries,
our womb,
womb and
right?
ovaries. Yeah.
and and let's vilify that and use that as a derogatory term, right? To blame us for, or to make not okay, and to show the pathology of women actually expressing their emotions. There's something that happens when the society there's a lot happens when the society systemically and systematically invalidates you, makes no space for your authentic presence, tells you that something's wrong with you. there's a lot of resentment that gets built up. There is a lot of rage that gets built up. There's a lot of grief that gets built up. A lot of joy that gets repressed, a lot of pleasure that gets repressed. And that and these are some outcomes of trauma, which then show up as physical symptoms. And they show up physically in terms of the physical expressions in the health area and in mental health as well. And mm, symptoms such as anxiety and depression, for example, are actually adequate trauma reactions. They start as adequate trauma reactions. What is anxiety? Is the mind
Mm.
and body, the whole system, the nervous system, getting into the state of hypervigilance, high activation, and tracking for danger, tracking for danger. It's actually very adaptive. It's a great survival skill. But if the trauma is present chronically, such as in the case of patriarchy, it's a trauma that's present now. Yes, it's not as severe as it was in generations prior. They don't burn us at the stake anymore.
Yeah.
Very grateful. However, there are all these traumas that happen through microaggressions, or sometimes not so microaggressions, that we experience every day, and also being exposed to the treatment of women around the planet. And every time we see that, our system goes, oh, like violence against women, right? Women's rights being violated. Our system goes, "Oh, it's unsafe." And so, of course, we have anxiety. And most women are, especially high achieving women, are medicated for anxiety, which is um, a normal expression of feeling unsafe. and and healing actually involves creating safety in the body. There are mind body energy tools to create that safety, and of course ultimately keeping on changing the world. Depression, same thing, comes starts out as an adaptive trauma response, such as going into flight freeze. So the system kind of shuts down, playing dead, disengaging. But if it's not addressed, if the trauma is not addressed, if the threat is present, it becomes chronic. And then we have the whole population on antidepressants. And these are the modern expressions of what then was termed hysteria. And by the way, oh my gosh, even the birth of psychology, psychoanalysis, then in the whole history of the field, has been so abusive to women.
Mm.
There's just like, not to go into like all the gory details. There are many, including locking up women in asylums for simply speaking their mind, a
Yeah.
practice that was still in effect in 1950s and 1960s in the UK and the US, for example. And all was needed to lock up a woman in an asylum was her husband saying, "Oh, no, my wife, she acts crazy," because
Oh,
like
yeah.
she didn't like the fact that he was sleeping with her sister or
Yeah.
something crazy like that, right? So and even the origin, like one of the origins of like a lot of psychological theory that is still taught in schools now, which is atrocious. um, Freud initially saw and heard accounts from women, accounts of sexual abuse, molestation, a lot of incest. And he rightfully attributed their symptoms of quote unquote hysteria to these experiences. And he presented it to the Psychological Society, and of all men, of course. And the response was he was shunned. He was called crazy. He was called completely unprofessional and out of his mind. And so he quickly recanted his views and he said, "Yes, esteemed colleagues, I was led astray. What actually is happening, women are fantasizing about being raped by their fathers."
Yeah. Oh my
It's
God.
a fantasy. It's a
Yeah.
fantasy. Women actually, like every woman, deeply desires to have it. So this fucked up strand began very early. And you know what? Like these things are still being taught,
Mm.
which is like you start deconstructing the levels of oppression. Yes, we can talk about the very extreme examples of women having no rights, but there are very subtle examples. You go to therapy, sit in the chair, you're supposed to be safe. It's actually one of our clients was just sharing in our program just this morning, so it's very fresh with me, about her experience with a male therapist who was pretty much giving her, saying all these super damaging things to her and her husband. So pretty much after the first session, her husband was like, I want a divorce. Never came up before, right? Damaging things. So I'm not saying don't go to therapy. I'm saying be discerning. If something doesn't feel right, if it feels like you're being dismissed, you're not being heard, if you're not in the position of being in the driver's seat, and if you feel like you are giving away your power to the authority, quote unquote, of the therapist who is a quote unquote an expert,
Yeah.
that's not right. You should always be in power. And it's the therapist's job to ensure that you are in power and you are in the driver's seat and you maintain your sovereignty and you make your own decisions. But of course, due to PSD, our natural inclination is to abdicate our power to authority, which is something
Yeah.
to be on the
And yes,
lookout for.
yeah, and I love you saying that, because my next comment would be about how, at least in my own personal life and the lives of my clients, and I'm sure that it's very, you will resonate with that, is that the heartbreaking piece of the fact that it's women who perpetuate this
Yes.
patriarchy, right? Because even if it's a, like, if it's boys, it's their moms who taught them how to
Yeah,
treat girls. um
it
I
is
know in my,
heartbreaking.
yeah, it's heartbreaking. So, and that's why so many times, so often, there are clashes between, mother-in-law and mother-in-laws, and just women,
Yeah.
cattiness, like this whole relationship between
Mm,
women.
so
It's,
painful.
yeah, that it's this crap that is coming up. And so, would you say that this is also part of this PSD
Oh,
disorder?
absolutely. And it's a very, very painful part. Of course, the strategy of divide and conquer is a very effective one, and patriarchy has used it so well. Divide women, pit women against one another, and patriarchy will stand forever. If women were to come out of the silos of shame where patriarchy locked us up, telling us there's something wrong with you need to hide. And if we think there is something wrong with us, we're going to project it onto other women because the same thing that's wrong with me is wrong with another woman. Like if I have issues with my body, right? I'm going to scan every woman for how much she weighs and judge her on the basis of
Yes.
is it too much or too little? And so many other things, whether she has children or not, whether she is married or not, whether or and what she says, or if she is being too much or extra, right?
Yes.
Right now. And all these things are things that we have not allowed ourselves to own in ourselves. And it's not our fault. Again, it's patriarchy. If we were to come out of these silos of shame and stop judging ourselves, stop judging one another, patriarchy wouldn't stand a day because we would see each other. We would be united in sisterhood. And we don't, that's the tragedy. We don't even know how much was stolen from us in the area of sisterhood because we've never experienced it.
Yes.
And that's probably the deepest tragedy. How much support could be available to us that is not that deep support, not only like, oh yeah, friends being there for you, but really deep, no judgment. Who here can say, oh yeah, I have a completely judgment free relationship with my mother or with my sisters or with my friends, right? There is no judgment whatsoever. There's unconditional love. What? And it's not nobody's fault. Our mothers didn't have unconditional love experience, or our grandmothers. And there's so much pain in this intergenerational disconnection. And it is on us to stop the cycle of the trauma transmission. Trauma is genetically transmitted, and so is healing. We can heal this in one generation. They've done studies on
Love
how
that.
trauma gets transmitted. And so does healing. We can heal this right now. The cycle can stop with us. If you're hearing it and resonating, get on the healing journey. It's for the sake of not only your life, your whole lineage, and the world.
Oh, I needed to hear that. I'll tell you why, because my mom has three daughters, so I'm the
Mm-hmm.
oldest. I have three daughters. So we are in my family, there are so many women, so many of us who are females. Like often my husband would say, oh my gosh, I can't, this estrogen is just driving me crazy. So both my dad and my husband are in the same boat. And I think this is a perfect place to kind of introduce a little bit of my story. I mean, my listeners are familiar with that, but what I'm working on healing for myself and also for my daughters is something that maybe, I don't know how it's going to sound to you, because I know you're working with a lot of women who are achievers, high achievers, who have been quote unquote successful in the workspace. Um, for me, my trauma, or my, I guess, stress response, or my numbing
Yeah.
mechanism
Mm-hmm.
was resorting to where quote unquote women are the best or should be, and that is
Mm-hmm.
at home,
Yeah.
being a good wife, being a good mom, and that's pretty much it. Everything else, I mean, it's nice if you can, I mean, like my mother-in-law, for example, she always say, like, it's nice for you to have like a hobby or something you can do with your hands. Like she was a seamstress, and
Mm.
using that gift, she was able to provide for her family. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it was her husband's job to provide.
Right.
Right. So providing, or working, or succeeding financially, it's a very interesting dynamic that happens in my family. I'll tell you why. Because, and this is where I'm a little bit confused, because
Mm-hmm.
both of my grandmothers, and we talked about the fact that we both are from Soviet Union, and how um, the system of oppressions in Russia, I think it was 10 times worse than it's maybe in the Western world even. At least that's how I experienced it. And I remember my mom, and the communism and all of that, it plays such a big role in that. And but in spite of all those things, both my grandmothers, my paternal and maternal grandmothers, were really, really successful. So my
Mm-hmm.
grandmother from my dad's side, she was one of 10 kids, and she was the only one who had high education.
Mm-hmm.
And she became English teacher, and she, till this day, she's 87 years old, Dr. Valerie, and she still teaches little kids in her home. Like, she's amazing, my
Oh.
grandmother. My maternal grandmother was one of the only women in her town who was in during communist times,
Mm-hmm.
who was she was basically, she had a managerial responsibilities in,
Yeah.
wherever she worked. And so I've seen, my grandmothers as these amazing women. And then we went through our first immigration. So when I was 6 years
Mm-hmm.
old, we immigrated to Israel, and I had seen the both of my grandmothers really kind of like losing their identity. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't remember them really speaking to me about this. I think a lot of it was subconscious for me.
Yeah.
But I had seen these amazing, successful women who had, their
Mm-hmm.
status, who had their so much wrapped up into this, identity of doing things not the way it's supposed to be in our
Yeah.
community, being all of a sudden being kind of like lowered into, again, this is my perception of what happened, but I have
Right.
seen them basically being lowered into the housewife slash cook slash domesticated
Mm-hmm.
you know um you know this new phase of their life basically.
Yeah.
And that deeply affected, and I didn't even know until I myself became a mom or a wife. And that
Mm-hmm.
reawakened in me when I really wanted to own a business and to be successful in what I do. But every single time I would go, let's say on a drive, or pick up my kids, and this journey, Dr. Valerie, lasted me a decade.
Mm-hmm.
10 painful years of really trying to understand. I'm just kind of right now shifting out of this. But I remember when I started noticing my thoughts, I would see, for example, women driving, in like fancy cars, or wearing really nice clothes and just really looking put together. The first thought I would had in my head is, oh, she probably has a rich husband, or
Mm-hmm.
she comes
Yeah.
from, it's like it wasn't even in my consciousness that it's possible for a woman to provide for herself. And yet both my grandmothers were really strong women, when
Yeah.
in their 50s and 40s. So what's happening here? Let's use my story as a case
Uh,
study. And why don't you walk us through maybe your framework for healing
yeah.
from PSD? And like I said, we can use my story as a case study.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing, Dorit. And I'm right there with you. There are so many intersections of the cultural context, the historical context in every story. There is the familial context, and then there's the whole overculture of patriarchy. And so even though we may have great role models in our families, that doesn't cancel out patriarchy in the overculture, and it doesn't cancel out that programming that we receive. And ah, it's such a struggle, right? Just feeling that viscerally. It takes so much to overcome that. And it doesn't have to be that way, by the way. So let me show the framework and then see how that applies to your story, how it applies to our listeners' stories. So try that on for size. The framework for healing PSD is born out of over 20 years of my own search and yeah, my own struggles, of course, and practice and working with clients and refining it until it distilled to a 5-step process.
Mhm.
I use the metaphor of the invisible in the prison when talking about PSD. And step one is waking up in prison. Is waking up in prison and recognizing that it's not you, quote unquote, holding yourself back. It's not you, quote unquote, self sabotaging. These are, you're running into the walls of the invisible in the prison, and what's where the walls are rooted, where what they're made out of are experiences, traumatic experiences of collective nature, generational nature, inherited and personal. Remember, trauma is any experience that made you feel unsafe physically or emotionally and created trauma adaptations. And once we see the invisible, we can do the impossible. I love that saying.
Yes, so good.
Yeah. And it gives us leverage, because if we're thinking something's wrong with us, it's really, we have the wrong target. And many of us spend years on this journey of trying to figure out what's wrong with us. I'm
Mhm.
raising my hand. And recognizing it's not us gives us leverage, and then we have something to work with. And in the second stage, we get to meet our prison guards. Prison guards are these trauma defenses that are developed when trauma is created. These are things that are meant to keep us safe. But the only way they keep us safe is keeping us locked in that trauma state. And
So
the
in my
defenses.
case, so in my
Hmm.
case, the prison guards would be those limiting beliefs that women cannot, can't make
Exactly.
money. It must be the man who provides.
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Yes, exactly. They show up as thoughts and stories of this variety that's holding us back. And the inner critic, the imposter syndrome, the so called upper limit problem, right? These are all trauma adaptations, things that keep us
Mm,
safe. They also show up in the body. They
mm,
show up through health expressions. There's a lot of inflammation that happens as an outcome of the body being constantly in a state of stress,
yeah.
because if we don't feel safe, and there are a lot of women who are like, okay, I'm going to do my mindset work, I'm going to overcome those limited beliefs, and I'm going to do what I need to do. And the unfortunate outcome is that a lot of these women suffer from adrenal fatigue. Autoimmune conditions are rampant and
Yeah.
affect women at the rate much higher than men, 70 to 95%.
Yeah.
There's trouble sleeping, there's trouble relaxing, there's trouble feeling pleasure, joy. There's
Low
this
libido. Yeah.
low
I see it all
libido.
the time.
There are so many health expressions that have to do pretty much anything can be linked to stress, and stress is linked to trauma. That's what runs chronic stress in our systems.
Yeah.
So healing trauma is not only life changing, it can be life saving,
Yeah.
truly, and the quality of life restoring. Prison guards also show up in our actions and choices. For example, you may have a very important proposal you need to work on that would open up doors for you, that has the promise of success,
Yeah.
and that feels unsafe.
Yes.
Success feels unsafe, visibility feels unsafe, money feels unsafe. And who do I think I am? All of these
Mhm,
things
mhm.
rooted in trauma. And so actions may be, oh, let me just do some social media research. And 3 hours later, with 50
Yes.
tabs open, we're nowhere close to completing it. And like, okay, I'll do it tomorrow, and something else comes up. And it's not about getting a better personal organizer, planner,
Yes.
and taking a course on
I
time
have so many
management.
of those. Yes. Yes, it's me. It's so me
It's
what you're describing. It's so me. Yeah.
It's about, yeah, and thank you for sharing. And it's everybody, truly. It's me too. And it's working on this, uncovering deeper layers of what we're being kept safe from and creating safety. So the next
Step.
step in the system is evolving the prison guards into bodyguards. So we use the same biological mechanisms that evolved to protect us, but we upgrade them by creating safety in the nervous system, and we upgrade them to the current conditions. Oh, guess what? It used to be unsafe for me to have money and be visible. Now it's actually unsafe for me not to have money.
Mm,
And to be invisible is unsafe because it's the death of my business. And that's my livelihood. That's my family's livelihood. So that evolution happens, and the prison guards actually get new shiny uniforms and promotions, and they actually support us in going to the next level of what we desire.
mm,
And then the next level is digging the tunnel, uncovering and healing deeper layers of trauma, which we're able to do because the prison guards who kept us from going there are now evolved, and we have more capacity.
mm,
Prison guards also take up so much capacity. In my book, I write about 90%
mm,
of our time and energy being consumed by the battle with prison guards, right? Procrastination, self sabotage, energy up and down. Oh, I don't want to do this. It's exhausting. We're fighting ourselves. And again, it's the wrong target. So when we evolve the prison guards to bodyguards, when we heal the underlying trauma, then the fifth stage is savoring freedom. And what happens
mm.
there oh, now I get to have the life of my dreams. I get to move toward my desires. I get to have the relationship I desire. I get to have the relationship with myself I desire, and the money and the impact, um, and
And the
everything else.
marriage and the motherhood experience.
The
Yeah.
motherhood experience that runs so deep. And what pops out then is what I call patriarchy police, because they police the speed limit of pleasure and joy, and how good can it get. And in this stage we increase our capacity. It's a physical thing, because for centuries a woman could not have her pleasure, her joy. So that those channels, those capacities are withered, and it never felt safe. So we actually open up energetically and physically, physiologically. We retrain the nervous system to experience pleasure and wellness and wealth and connection and intimacy, vulnerability, all of these beautiful things as safe, and begin to create capacity to have more of that. So that's what I call the game of how good can it get
Love it.
versus the game of how much can I bear that we inherited.
Love it so, so, so much. It's so good. I love the 5 step framework. And I think where I am right now is I think I'm about at step 4. I think I'm already kind of starting to see um, those prison guards for what they are. um,
Mm-hmm.
and then I guess it's part of the system to I call this process healing the mother wound, and really learning to mother myself and rewiring the brain. I guess it's all part of that. Is this something we can do on ourselves, on our own, or is this something that needs to be guided?
I'm so glad you asked. There is a lot that we can do for ourselves. Definitely awareness and unpacking and journaling and observing. And it's important to understand that trauma was created when the experience overwhelmed our capacity to be with it, and and that's how it got frozen in the body, in our system. So to heal those deeper experiences, we actually need to plug into another nervous system. We
Mm-hmm.
need somebody to hold that safe and sacred space for us. It can be one person who is deeply trained in somatic trauma work, somatic energetic, because you can't heal trauma by just talking about it.
Yes.
um, or it can be a community. In our programs, we have both components, and community is really key, because first we see that everybody's on the same journey and in the same boat. Then we have the opportunity to come out of the silos of shame and isolation of thinking something's wrong with us, and actually be met with celebration and connection. That's that environment of sisterhood without judgment, with a lot of support, because we see that it's been patriarchy all along. Is right. And that is deeply, deeply healing. And of course, prison guards also hide in plain sight. Some of them are more obvious and others are not. Their strength is in their stealth. And so it's really hard to identify on ourselves. For example, I work with my partner, who is my life partner, and also my partner in this work, who is also trained in somatic and energy trauma healing work. His name is Jeffrey. And he supports my healing, and he's the one holding the mirror and safe container for my processes, because even though I know how to do this, but it's like if you're a heart surgeon and you can perform a stellar operation on somebody else, you can't operate on yourself.
I love it so, so much. And I know, Dr. Valley, you have to go soon. So I just want to shift quickly into the second part of the interview. It's been so much fun. The second part of the interview is really questions about you as a woman. Are you ready? They're going to be really short.
Sure, let's
Okay.
let's do it.
So in one word, what is feminine power? What does feminine power mean to you?
Embodiment.
About that. What makes you feel confident?
When I'm rested.
What energizes you?
um Joy.
What makes you feel sexy?
um hmm. It's, oh gosh, so many things. I want to say it's a natural state for me when I feel rested and embodied and connected. So all of the above.
Love that. What does being a woman mean to you in one sentence?
It means it means having an authentic experience of what it means to be in this female body in this lifetime and in these relationships and in this complexity of what we got going on, right?
Love it so much. My last question for you, Dr. Valerie. In one sentence, what is your vision for your life? What are you creating? What is your life's purpose?
My life's purpose is to have every woman um, experience her unconditional worth, her unconditional beauty, her unconditional power. And to accomplish that, right, a book is a part of the effort. So I hope if if our listeners are resonated, I hope are resonating, I hope you pick up your copy, share it, be a part of this movement. You can download the first chapter of the book on my website, drvalerie.com/book. And also, I want to mention, as a part of this movement, we are sharing this experience of shifting from survival to thriving in virtual retreats that are free to attend. There's no cost to attend. It will cost you your life. Literally, it will cost you the status quo. It will cost you the prison. So if you're not ready to leave the prison cell, it's not for you. And if you are ready to break the cycle of trauma transmission right now in one generation, then come and join us. The thrivingexperience.com is where you can learn more about these experiences and join us for the next one. And also share with women you want to share this experience and healing with.
Oh, so beautiful. And also your Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, your Facebook, your free Facebook group. I have the links to all of that.
Thank you, Dorit.
I will make sure to share all of those in the show notes below. Dr. Valerie, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being courageous and doing this work that is so freeing. I'm going to speak for myself, and because it's freeing to me, it's freeing also for my daughters. And I know you also have a daughter. And so
Yes.
this work is so, so, so important, because I believe, and I know you hold the same belief, is that women are so powerful. We can do so much good. We can bring so much good into this world, and it really, really begins with women like you who step up and do this deep work with yourself, but also then being courageous to, it's like a big sister, grab the hands of women and come on, come with me on the other side. And I know this is
Yeah.
not an easy feat, so thank
Yeah.
you, thank you,
Thank
thank
you
you.
so much. And all our listeners are a part of this, making this possible, as are you. So thank you so much, everyone, for being a part of this world changing, life changing journey. It's a pleasure changing the world with you.
Thank you so much. Wait, before you go, I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and if you did, I want to know about it. So snap a picture of you listening to this episode and share it on Instagram or Facebook. On Instagram, you can tag me at Dorit Palvanov Coaching. So Dorit is spelled as Dorit, and Palvanov spelled as Palvanov Coaching. So it's all one word. Or you can use the hashtag confident, energized, and sexy mama podcast. You see, my personal goal beyond having amazing conversations with guests or hosting solo episodes is to increase the visibility for this platform and these messages to be shared and heard by women who need it the most. And there's no way that I can do this on my own. So I'm asking you, the incredible community of confident, energized, and sexy mamas, to help me with this goal. So whether you're coming to me through iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you're listening to the show from, please rate, review, and subscribe to the show. This would mean the world to me, and it's so, so helpful for other mothers who are looking for this information. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you next time. Bye for now.